Margie, can anybody hear me?
We are now live. I want to welcome everyone for joining us for today's October 20th, 2022.
Can you hear me? This is Terry in Santa Barbara.
Yeah.
I was asking if you could hear me because I couldn't, no one was responding to me. I need to let CBS, let them know that we're live, okay? Just hold on a second.
Sure. I'll wait.
Thank you.
Tell us
What's on the big time?
ESPN too.
Yeah.
Okay, we're good to go. And Director Chair Williams just stepped into the building. Yes.
Yeah. So he's in the building, but he's not in his seat yet. So
he is in his seat.
Hello.
Oh, there you go. You have the meeting then. I will mute myself and you go for it.
Thank you, Janelle. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's October 20th SBCAG board meeting. For the record, my name is Das Williams. I'm the chair of the SBCAG board. And let me apologize to my members. All this great gas tax work all around the city of Santa Barbara has made it hard to make the transfer. And we had a meeting this morning for SBCAG and Caltrans for the roundabout, the folks impacted by businesses impacted by the roundabout. Madam Clerk, please facilitate roll call.
Thank you, Chair Williams. For the roll call, Director Hart here. Hartman.
Here.
Nelson. Levanino.
Here.
Infante.
Here.
Julian.
Here.
Sierra.
Here.
Osborne.
Here.
Patino.
Here.
Parodi.
Here.
Clark.
Here.
Rouse.
Here.
And Chair Williams.
Here. Please join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 3 is public comment. Is there any public comment for items not on the agenda?
Chair Williams, we received no prior requests for a public comment and no attendees requesting to speak.
Thank you. None in North County? Great.
None in North County.
Then we'll move on to item 4, the consent calendar. Is there any items on the consent calendar that directors would like to pull or that the public would like to make comment on? Crickets. That's great. Can I get a motion on the consent calendar?
Hartman moves approval.
Second. Roll call, please. First by Hartman, a second by Hart.
Director Hart.
Yes.
Hartman.
Aye.
Nelson. Levanino.
Aye.
Infante.
Aye.
Julian.
Aye.
Sierra.
Aye.
Osborne.
Aye.
Patino.
Aye.
Parodi.
Aye.
Clark.
Aye.
Rouse.
Aye.
And Chair Williams.
Aye.
Motion passes 12-0.
Item 5. Madam Clerk, would you please read item 5 into the record?
Thank you, Chair Williams. Item 5 is Highway 101 Coastal Access Projects. Approve and authorize the chair to execute Amendment Number 2 to the Memorandum of Understanding with the County of Santa Barbara to increase the funding by $1,202,792 for a revised amount not to exceed $4,122,792 without a change to the period of performance.
Okay, good morning, and it's good to see a full house here in Santa Maria. Fred Luna, Director of Project Delivery and Construction. So the item before The SBCAG board today is a consideration for an amendment to this agreement that SBCAG has with the County of Santa Barbara's Public Works specifically to implement several, thank you for the slideshow, implement several of the coastal access projects that were funded and are being done in parallel with the Highway 101 improvements. The first 7 miles that received funding in 2018. So we do have representatives from the county here, Chris Doolittle and Chris Sneddon with the Public Works staff. They are leading the implementation of several of these projects. The request is specific to the Santa Claus Lane streetscape as far as requesting additional funds, but we thought that we just give an update on all the projects that are covered by the MOU and give a status report on that. So by way of background, maybe we can dim some of the lights in the room here, make it easier to read, but I mentioned this already. Thank you, Director Lavagino. Okay. These projects for the first 7 miles of Highway 101 were funded in 2018 through Senate Bill 1 funding and matched by local money and Caltrans SHOP money. And so those have moved forward. And then along with that funding award, SBCAG and Caltrans received about $30 million for additional parallel projects in the corridor. And specifically, the ones covered under this MOU were about $18.6 million in construction funding from the Solutions for Congested Corridors program. These are the projects that were funded in Cycle 1 through Senate Bill 1, and specifically, I kind of boxed out the ones that are covered under the MOU in red. There's the North Padaro Lane project, which the county delivered successfully in August, and funds were voted, and I understand that they'll be opening bids today on that project. And then there's 2 projects in Summerlin, one on the coastal side and then one on the inland side. The coastal improvements will add coastal parking along Wallace Avenue. And then the inland improvements will add a bike lane and connect a coastal trail connection on the California Coastal Trail on Via Real. And then the last project is improvements on Santa Claus Lane itself, streetscape improvements, coastal parking improvements, and so that's the subject of today's discussion on the cost increase. So this table kind of shows some progress on all 4 of those projects. I think just focus, like I said before, on the left there's the North Padaro project that you can see that essentially all the milestones have been completed except the start of construction. And as I mentioned, the county would be opening bids. So they're likely to start construction in early 2023. And then the other projects, as we've gone through the project development, we've needed to ask for time extensions with the California Transportation Commission. So we have a deadline to submit a request for allocation of funds for construction by February of 23. So that's the deadline that our team is working hard with the county and Caltrans to get those projects delivered. And it's really a collaborative process. We meet monthly on those projects, in addition to all the work that county staff does every day to deliver those projects. And so that's the deadline. We had a good constructive meeting yesterday to identify some of the key deliverables that are still remaining and what's left to accomplish that. And then you can see there at the bottom line, if by delivering those in February 2023, then they would go to the California Transportation Commission to vote the funds, and that's likely scheduled for the May 2023 meeting, and then some discretion for the county on when they can deliver those to construction. There is a deadline of 6 months after the funds are allocated that they would need to award a contract, or they could ask for an extension of that if there's reasons why it doesn't make sense to do that. So the North Padaro project. So this project, just for orienting you, this is in between Summerland and Toro Canyon along Highway 101, North Padaro interchange. So what you're looking at here is on Padaro Lane, looking up towards the mountains, and there's existing coastal access right now at the park that's owned by or owned and operated by county parks through the Loon Point parking lot. But what was missing here was a connection for the sidewalk and equestrian improvements directly to the park. And so this project will add those improvements. You can see there on the left, the sidewalk will be constructed behind guard railing. And then on the right, equestrians currently use the road, but then there'll be a new connection provided to them to reach the trailhead down and then the coastal access point. This project was completed for project development under budget, and then we'll see today how the bids compared to the funding allocation when that comes in. The next project is Via Real. So this is a project that is on the inland side in the community of Summerland. So you can see a combination of things going on here. The current project has shoulders and roadway, but not formalized bike lanes to the degree. So we're creating a buffered bike lane with a sidewalk on the coastal side. And so this was a project that was identified in the local coastal program amendment that was approved when Highway 101 went through the county permitting process. And then on the right there, you see a sound wall that was recently built for the Summerlin Cottages community. So that was actually part of the Highway 101 improvements as a noise attenuation for that development and the park itself. And so this is a rendering of what it potentially would look like with the buffered bike lanes and the Class 2 bike facilities, plus the sidewalk on the coast side. And then this project is on the coast side of Summerland. So again, both of these projects kind of interweave with what's being done with the Highway 101 improvements. You can see there on the left is the Evans Avenue undercrossing. And so that's being reconstructed with the Highway 101 project, new community identifiers and new aesthetic treatments on that structure, but then working closely with county staff on the improvements on how the ped and bike access through this area would connect with the improvements they're proposing that provide additional coastal parking along Wallace Avenue if you're looking straight down the street there. And then to the right is Lookout Park. And so that provides coastal access to the beach. And then the most complicating factor here is you can see the railroad tracks in proximity to the crossings and working with the railroad and coming to an agreement. And so that milestone was recently reached where an understanding was reached on where the crossing would occur and, approval for that. And now my understanding is that waiting for the construction maintenance agreement from the railroad that the county would then act on. So you can see here the crosswalks and improvements. And so all the pedestrians would be crossing on the east side of this intersection and in one location. And then that'll make it easier for when they park along Wallace Avenue and the coast to access that crossing into the park. And then the last project is the Santa Claus Lane Streetscape project. So this project is on Santa Claus Lane between South Padaro and South Padaro and the freeway on the south. So it's bordered by current work on the freeway that's going on right now. The Bikeway project, which we presented on a few months ago, that started construction in September. That's to the south and to the east. And so the county's project will beautify and add coastal parking and formalize some of that parking. But another key element you can see on the right there is continuation of that Class 1 bikeway so picking up where the Santa Claus Lane bikeway continues and continuing to the north and then all the way along the stretch of Santa Claus Lane up to South Padaro. Some of the other improvements in this area that have recently been done is a lot of intensive work related to utility relocation. So to make sure that that has been accomplished so that it's not in the way when construction does start next year sometime. And I think the schedule for this is that, like I mentioned before, delivery deadline of February for submitting allocation requests for construction, and submittal vote of the funds in May at the earliest by the California Transportation Commission, and then the county has indicated that it would be likely to start construction in the fall of 23 to avoid the summer season for the beach. We did a similar approach for the bikeway project to start outside the summer season. So in one of the following slides, we'll go through some of the details as to why the cost increase is needed for this project to get through project development. We're on the final push towards a February date for submitting that information to the California Transportation Commission. And I'll go through that in a second. Okay, so here are some of the key issues as to why. And then if there's any particular questions, like I indicated, county staff is here if they on some of the details about that. So this project requires design coordination. So there's a number of things that are going on in this area, particularly building that bikeway approved adjacent to Caltrans right away, and building retaining walls and getting those needing to be approved by Caltrans. But the number of meetings that have gone on and approvals required, and then getting those freeway maintenance agreements in place. So that's required a very intensive effort to make sure that those meet all the requirements that Caltrans is asking for, and also meet the requirements of the project to allow for what's desired for that bikeway along there. And then the utility and UPR coordination. And my understanding is there's a number of utilities in Santa Claus Lane that have had to be coordinated with and addressed. And so that's been a very intensive effort as well. And then there's two crossings on each side, one into the Sandpoint development, which is a residential development. A private crossing exists there right before the Santa Claus Lane southbound on-ramp. And then on the north side, a crossing towards Padaro Lane. And so both of those require UPR coordination and some type of discussion, and then an easement discussion for one of the particular crossings. And then permits. So similar to the Santa Claus Lane Bikeway being by the coast, there were impacts to coastal wetlands in this area. And so you have to mitigate for those. So the regulatory permits require both getting the permits and then mitigating for them. And so there's additional work and costs associated with that. Lastly, the county still needs to get their final approval from SBAR, which is the South County Board of Architectural Review, and before the project can get to construction and get the permits issued. And then there's been a lot of intensive effort, and you've heard at this board about working with the community and the businesses along Santa Claus Lane. And so that's taken up quite a bit of time from county staff to work with them and coordinate the utilities in conjunction with SBCAG and Caltrans as well, because we had work going on in there as well. So the recommendation before the board today is to increase the funding for the Santa Claus Lane streetscape by $1.2 million to complete the design, the right-of-way utilities, and the railroad coordination that has been necessary and continues to be necessary to complete the projects, and seek allocation vote for submitting to the California Transportation Commission. I'd like to say that like I mentioned in each of the profiles for the projects, some of the other projects under the MOU would likely have underruns. So there may be a potential to reduce the amount, but at this point in time, we're not ready to close out those projects. So on balance, I think the cost will be slightly less than that if you look at the total MOU. But staff will continue to look at those cost savings in the MOU and for project development, and then for capital as well. And so the deadline, like I mentioned before, we're all working towards is a February 23 deadline right around the corner. So I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Questions from board members?
We have one up here.
Thank
Go
you,
ahead.
Chair Williams. So we don't fund the 1.2 million. What are the alternatives for this project?
Well, right now, the county public works staff is out of money for this particular project. We could divert some of the money from one of the other projects, prospectively perhaps, and knowing that we would have an underrun, but it's like I just mentioned, we don't yet know that, and we haven't done the final closeout. So to continue work, they would need to have additional funds.
Could the scope be reduced?
Don't believe so. We've asked that question, but I think the intent is they want to build all the improvements. And I don't think that saves money on project development. It may save money on capital, but they still need to go through certain processes that are across the entire corridor. But correct me if I'm wrong, Chris.
Your question.
Other questions?
Yes, Director Sierra has a question.
Are we done?
All right, yeah, you're not.
Go
done
ahead.
yet.
Not done. I mean, I'm
Okay.
hoping to get an answer. So I don't think I've gotten one yet. So
We have a lot of requirements for completion of this project from the public outreach and the efforts that we've put into the project in terms of tying in to the Santa Claus Lane Bike Path project. There is a pedestrian at-grade crossing onto the Santa Claus Lane Beach. That is also a substantial project deliverable that we're working on. There's requirements from the permitting agencies to mitigate the wetlands and provide these elements. So the whole package is satisfying all the requests for the project.
and so what I'm trying to get at is there no ability to reduce the scope of the project to save on costs? Or is the project just an open checkbook for any of the requests that come in?
No, it's mainly the right-of-way limitations in order to get the elements of the project, like I'm sorry, I may adjust my mic.
Yeah.
So in order to get the full right-of-way use out there and provide all the facilities that we're looking to do, which is sidewalk connecting through the beach and through the business section, requires a certain amount of right-of-way. To increase the parking levels that were requested, we're putting in angled parking. That also greatly increases the width, and that has required us to design and look and build out the cost for retaining walls. There's a fairly large amount of retaining walls, both along the beach for approximately a quarter mile, and then the whole project length is a half-mile long project, and we have a substantial amount of retaining walls to support the 101 facilities as well as the Caltrans maintenance yard, and to utilize all the space that we have. And we're also requesting right away from Caltrans and the state to get these projects in built. So we can't really micro or minimize the project without basically destroying the intent of the project, which is to fully build and connect these multimodal communication systems.
So the budget fits the project no matter what.
Yeah.
The project can't fit the budget.
The project as it was given to us is a substantial project. It's a half-mile long project with a lot of elements and a lot of coordination with the other agencies and utilities. So it would have to be substantially reduced, which would not really give us the elements that we're required to deliver as part of the project.
Okay. Well, I just finish up. My concern is that projects continue to change throughout this process, and I guess that's somewhat natural. But I also want to make sure that it's not an open checkbook for all change orders or all conceptual changes that happen throughout this corridor. We continue to spend a significant amount of funds on this project that really limit those taxpayer dollars being spent up in other parts of our county that are in absolute need of these improvements as well. So that's my concern as we move forward with these projects, that it shouldn't be an open checkbook, because we can't get things like the Robinson Bridge done in Lompoc, or a lot of improvements in Santa Maria that are costing lives up here, because we're continuing to make enhancements on some of these projects down there that are just really, they're nice enhancements. I'm not against them in concept, but when we have to put everything else in the rest of the county aside for 10 or 15 years while we work through this process, I really would hope that we're really doing the value engineering. We're getting our pencils and looking at the spreadsheets and finding ways to get things done within the costs that we already have budgeted for these projects. And the overruns are, ultimately concerning to me as a representative of a different portion of the county that is served by this project, but not as directly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I guess my question is, we've gone from just under 3 million to now 4.12. How was it misjudged so badly? I mean, that's more than 30% increase in the cost. How did this get judged? How did it get missed?
So the cost for project development was for 2.9 million was comprised of three different components, with the majority of them for the Santa Claus Lane streetscape project. But yeah, it was underestimated as far as a percentage of construction at the time. When the baseline agreement, back when I mentioned in 2018, was executed for not just the construction funds, then these funds are being paid for from another SB1 funding source, local partnership, which is then matched by our measure. And so there was a certain amount there that was estimated based on what we expected was the about 10-12% of the construction costs at the time, not knowing some of the complications, I think, because of the concept level of where we were at that time through these projects. And so all the utility relocations and some of the design issues that we mentioned, plus all the two railroad impacts. So that was part of the reason why it was underestimated at the time.
Okay, and one other question, Fred. The county and SBCAG are working together on Santa Claus Lane along with Caltrans. Wasn't it supposed to be pretty much, wasn't the county supposed to be putting more money into this too? I mean, it's unincorporated area. What happened to the county money that was supposed to be used for this?
I'm not aware of the county having been required to put money in this. Back when the local coastal program amendment was approved by the county, it indicated that Caltrans was responsible for delivery, not just of the highway improvements, but the parallel projects as well. When the SB1 funds were voted, we assigned certain implementing agencies for certain projects, but the recipients of the funds were either SBCAG or Caltrans, and so the money is coming through SBCAG on that one. So.
Okay, even though it's unincorporated.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I guess my concern is the same as Director Nelson's. I've always been a proponent of the 101 HOV, the widening. I backed it 100%, but it's starting to really, it's just chiseling away. And there's other projects in other parts of the county that need help. So I just, yeah, this just bothers me. Thank you.
Director Bettina?
Yeah, and I would just like to reiterate that also. 101, of course, should have been done years ago, and we know that. And I'm so happy it's being done now. But we don't want to see more enhancements at the cost of things that should be done in North County, because we did support this down in 101, and there's a lot of things around Santa Maria and the rest of North County that need to be taken care of. Thank you.
Any more comments from up north?
Yes.
Director Nelson.
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair Osborne. It's just thinking about it, there might be some benefit in starting to talk about, what we need to do to finish the widening portion of this project, but these extra additional projects that are very connected to it, put those on a separate pathway that could free up funds in the future to kind of move beyond the 101 widening for these additional projects that are, I know we're doing them together because there's a reason to do some of them together, but maybe slow down and think about starting to open up, the investment plan to other parts of the county as we do some of these connecting projects that are moving forward. I mean, we all are extremely invested in the widening. We know how important that is. But as some of these, I don't mean to disparage them, but gingerbread projects that are connected to this are discussed, they don't all have to be fully funded before we move beyond into other parts of the county.
Mr. Hart.
Yeah, I appreciate the concerns expressed about, the parallel projects. They are conditions of approval of the larger project, and it would be really helpful, I think, in a future meeting to have staff really look at how much money the 101 project has leveraged our local dollars with additional state and federal funding. It is an astonishing amount. The original projections back when we passed Measure A were that we'd have the $135 million of local dollars, and we'd match that. I can't remember the precise ratio, but it was probably 4 to 1. And the end result has been much, much, much larger than that. And I think that would be a profound thing to share with the public, the ability of the staff to attract additional state and federal dollars to help pay for these parallel projects that are required. So, we have to kind of go through this difficult process of getting the big project finished, doing these additional things that have ultimately become permit requirements for completing that project. And I appreciate the patience that the North County board members have exhibited to date about all this, but I think it would be helpful for the whole board to really understand in context how this money's been allocated and where the additional costs have come on the parallel projects, but keeping in mind the relationship of those projects to much more state and federal money coming into the overall project as well.
Other questions or comments from board members?
This is Joan. I'd like to just say, I was going to say what Supervisor Hart said, that these are required projects and that we are getting a lot more money because of this set of projects. And the only point I would add is it would be hugely expensive if we could separate them to go back at a later point and try to put these in. So it's a legacy effort. It will define Santa Barbara for 100 years. Again, there are many needs in North County, but fortunately we do have SB1. We do have a funding source going forward. So I'm optimistic we're going to get to ours soon.
Director Lavanino and then Director Nelson.
Thanks. Yeah, I think you're both right. And I think we're all saying the same thing, is that these projects are required. We all agree that they need to be done. But I think what you're hearing today is, we agreed to buy a car. What is it, a Cadillac or is it a Chevy? We just want to make sure that these projects, the scope doesn't, there isn't scope creep, and we're not putting, golded lining on all this stuff. So I think we all agree that these projects need to be done. We know that they are required, but we're just getting a little nervous about the dollars starting to increase.
I have a response, but it sounds Director Nelson, go ahead.
I wanted to acknowledge, what my vision, what I'm trying to talk about with these parallel projects is maybe as we widen, we look at bringing up some of our STIP dollars. There was a compromise that was made north and south to spend $140 million on this project. The compromise was never to take all of our TIP dollars to devote it to this project. Okay, so all of our regional dollars are being pushed into this project. And I think everybody in the north has said, that's fine. We know that the need is there and they can leverage more, but that wasn't the original deal. So I'm really interested in moving the investment plan to start to free some of those dollars up, and so that we can begin to start to work projects forward. And so I'm just making sure there's a prioritization. I'm fully committed to, while I'm serving on the Board of Supervisors and SBCAG, to delivering the parallel projects, but it does not mean that we don't work on other regions of the county. There's a legacy in Santa Barbara that will happen for this project. I'm concerned about the legacy throughout the entire county. And so, I really like to see those RTIP dollars start to flow back into other parts of the county instead of being sucked up by this project. It really is going to put a deferral on a lot of these transportation projects through all of our municipalities that are going to take 10 or 20 years for us to catch up. And so I think there's an urgency for us to start to look at that and get those dollars back into play.
Any other
Understood.
comments?
Director Williams, I just wanted to provide a response to at least some of what I had heard.
Yes, Mr. Luna.
Okay, so what I failed to mention was, but I think it was generally outlined in the recommendation, was that the additional funds would come from the board-approved Regional Surface Transportation Program Fund, the 101 Reserve. What I'm hearing is that there's a number of actions that have been coming to the board about cost increases. And so in isolation, you will come back with a kind of a consolidation of what that looks like and kind of an update on how we're faring, kind of a status check on the checkbook for the RSTB funds. Let's just put it that way. That makes sense. And we can certainly do that. As far as the investment plan that is in our work element next year to at least start that, a key deliverable on that was going to be in May and June when we hear back on the Senate Bill 1 awards for the remaining, and then we can kind of more accurately plan out how long the 101 is going to take to finish. And so that's really a key driver to that. And and we can certainly start that conversation. So.
And I, as chair, I just wanted to say for my part that I think this sounds like that folks' patience would be improved if we started talking about what happens next. And I hear that loud and clear. And so, in my last couple months and maybe in Janelle's first couple months, we could talk about getting into that because it sounds like that would extend people's patience. I do think that it's, hard to hold our county public works folks to the feet to the fire for requirements that are largely put on them by the Coastal Commission or by physical constraints. And, so I looked at this and cringed when I saw it, like as you, but I think again, it's a required project. We got to deliver the required projects. If we don't, that will hurt us getting money in the future. And this is also a little bit of a splitting up the project, even if it was possible, would be like the last nail in the coffin for some of these business owners along that corridor who are already now impacted by construction that will extend through the holiday season, and many of them aren't going to make it. Splitting the project and then extending it would be disastrous for them, even if it was possible. So, is there a motion?
Sorry, it's Julian. I just want to echo all the way down on south around Carpinteria and Summerlin. We have the same issues there in Guadalupe with 166, the railroad, and Highway 1. And our next meeting this coming Tuesday is regarding. And I talked to Mr. Luna about this, that we have some huge issues regarding our the corridor between right at Guadalupe 1 railroad and Highway 166. And we're getting hammered by our local residents. What are you doing? And I know there's some construction projects that are going on with the bridge and with the Highway 1, but we really need to look at, and I echo what our North County representatives are saying, we need to look at the focus on what's going on this side, on the north side of town. So I just wanted to echo that.
Well, I commit definitely to starting that process, and I'm sure that that Janelle will Director Osborne will be continuing that process as chair as well. Is there public comment?
Chair Williams, we have no request for public comment.
I'll move the recommended action, Lavanino.
I'll second it.
Who was the second? I'm sorry.
Nelson.
Thanks.
Hold on just a sec. Just hold on just a second, because we have a question whether we're broadcasting, and we want to not have to do this all over again. So let's just take a 4-minute bio break or 3-minute bio break and make sure we're broadcasting. I hope everyone enjoyed that bio break. We did confirm that we are broadcasting correctly. Can everyone hear me in North County?
We're hot up here. If you're ready, I think our mics are live.
Great. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Now,
Great. So I hope everyone enjoyed the bio break. We did confirm that we are broadcasting, and there was a motion and a second. Please call the roll call.
Director Hart,
Aye.
Hartman,
Aye.
Nelson,
Aye.
Davenino,
Aye.
Infante,
Aye.
Julian,
Aye.
Sierra,
Aye.
Osborne,
Aye.
Patino,
Aye.
Parodi,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Rouse,
Aye.
and Chair Williams.
Aye.
Motion passes 13-0.
We're now to item 6, Transportation Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act. Madam Clerk, will you please read item 6 into the record?
Thank you. Item 6, Transportation Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act. Receive presentation on approval of SBCAG TIFIA loan by U.S. Build America Bureau and receive a summary of impact of TIFIA payments on Measure A program.
Mr. Kachek?
Thank you, Chair Williams, directors. Nice to see you all. Hope you're having a good autumn season. Sarkis Kachek, Director of Programming with SBCAG. So we have some good news for your board today and the public on our federal loan for TIFIA. So I'm going to attempt to do this. There we go. We did it. All right. So Executive Director Kern likes to use the phrase, we are small but mighty. And so this is a good example of that. We also like to say that teamwork makes the dream work. So we've realized a dream on this. It's from the Lego movie, Director Patino. Yes, yes. But all joking aside, SBCAG received great news from the U.S. Department of Transportation that we closed on our federal TIFIA loan. And so we're excited about that. As you are aware, we do need financing for the Measure A program. While we are collecting receipts, while we are committed to a match to the state of California with our Measure A program for the Senate Bill 1 Cycle 1 funding, which Mr. Luna discussed in the prior item. And so this TIFIA loan from the federal government is going to help us with cash flow for the Measure A program, the entire Measure A program, not just the 101 project. And so a couple of the directors remember that we were in Washington, D.C., making the pitch to the U.S. Department of Transportation and the TIFIA folks. And the reason why we pursued the federal TIFIA loan, as it says on the slide, is flexibility, flexibility, flexibility. By not going into the public bond market, the federal government gives us multiple benefits. One is when we draw on the loan, there is no prepayment penalty. So Melissa Schick with KNN, our financial advisor, is on. She'll go more into the details. So we were approved for a certain amount on the loan. We only draw down what we need, and we can just draw down when we need to. And also the interest only accrues as the loan is drawn versus interest accruing on the entire amount on a bond. So if we did a $75 million bond, we'd be paying interest on the entire amount. So we're only drawing certain amounts. And one thing that's not on here, which I also wanted to note, is while we closed on a certain interest rate, the US DOT does provide the opportunity for refinancing. So as we go along through Measure A, if I noticed rates have gone up, but if for some reason rates do come back down, we can pursue a refinancing with US DOT. So with that, we will go ahead and hand it off to Melissa, and she will go into the details on the loan.
Great. Thank you, Sarkis. Oops, one slide before. But it's a pleasure to be here this morning, and just a huge congratulations to SBCAG in closing on the TIFIA loan. It was a tremendous amount of work, and certainly SBCAG staff deserves that recognition in getting here today. The final details of the TIFIA loan borrowing are largely consistent with all of the expectations that we communicated to your board. It's a not to exceed of 75 million and expected to be drawn upon as may be needed to address Measure A cash flow needs with regard to the Highway 101 project specifically. The final rate that was secured, we secured it on the day of closing on the loan, was 4.02%. So that will be the interest rate on the loan as drawn and as repaid over time. As Sarkis mentioned, that rate can be refinanced with the US DOT or in the public bond market in the future should rates be more favorable. The expectation is over the construction period of the Highway 101 project that SBCAG staff will draw on the loan as needed and pay interest-only payments over the construction period. Subsequent to being either fully drawn or fully utilized as needed, then SBCAG will begin paying fixed principal and interest payments on the loan to the US DOT through fiscal 40, which coincides with the term of the Measure A tax. Next slide. So this is just a detailed summary of estimated debt service payments on the TIFIA loan. And the way the Measure A cash flow works, those debt service payments do come off the top before the Measure A distribution to jurisdictions. So you'll see here up front, we're showing interest-only payments, which then once the loan is fully drawn, SBCAG will pay both principal and interest payments through fiscal 40, as just discussed. We note that there is, let's see, through fiscal 26 through fiscal 30, payments are approximately 3 million higher a year, and then will then decline in fiscal 31 through fiscal 40 to about 5.6 million. And then next slide. This is just a graphical depiction of the estimated debt service schedule on the TIFIA loan. And again, these would be the annual payments that are made from Measure A prior to distribution of Measure A dollars to jurisdictions. Next slide. So just a couple things, and again, hitting on the flexibility of the TIFIA loan. You know, the debt service schedules that we just reviewed with you, while we've closed on the loan, we do consider them estimates in that SBCAG will only make debt service payments on the amount that is drawn on the TIFIA loan. So if it ends up being that from a cash flow perspective, the entire 75 million is not needed, and by way of example, if SBCAG only draws up to 70 million of the loan, then the repayment structure would then be reduced kind of on a pro rata basis based on the actual amount of the loan that's utilized. So I know staff will be working closely and really balancing available Measure A cash and what is actually needed from the outside borrowing perspective. And then just finally, the other aspect that could change the the estimated debt service payments is just the frequency and the timing of drawing on that loan. So we provided an estimated schedule to the US DOT just based on expectations for Measure A revenues and project spending. If revenues come in higher or project spending is quicker, there may be some modifications to the actual annual payments made to the US DOT. Next slide. I guess I'll turn it back to you, Sarkis.
Thank you, Melissa. Appreciate it. And so those are the numbers that Melissa presented. And if we could have thank you. With the closing of the loan, we did get some recent good press, and that was by the U.S. Department of Transportation. Deputy Secretary Polly Trottenberg and the U.S. DOT team provided a press release on our loan. So that was a nice recognition by them on that. And then in terms of next steps, Martha Gibbs, our finance guru, is monitoring our Measure A finances and identifying how much we need to draw down, just being mindful of the interest payments and the impact to Measure A and to our local partners. So we're working with her on that. Next month, now that we've closed on the loan and know what the debt payments are, we're taking those numbers. We're getting numbers from our our Measure A revenue firm, HDL, and we're going to package that together into the Measure A revenue estimates. So in that way, the board and our local partners can see what the most recent estimates are, what the debt payments are, and what the impact is to the local agencies. And then we'll continue to monitor if there's any changes in interest rate in our favor to pursue that refinancing. And then the last bullet, our role is to identify, pursue, and secure the final funding needed to complete the 101 corridor. And so we're doing that with our different federal grants and then our upcoming Senate Bill 1 grants that we're submitting to the California Transportation Commission. And we'll know about those in May and June, like Mr. Luna mentioned. He also mentioned the Measure A strategic plan. We're actually going to start updating that in January. Once we submit the grant applications, just to develop the scenarios and see where we are with delivering on the 101 and the impact on the remaining projects. This is going to be my last slide. We've been working on this for a while. It was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, but we did it. So I wanted to thank Executive Director Kern for all of her support and leadership on this. I also wanted to thank Martha Gibbs, Fred Luna, and Jackie Mata on the SBCAG team. Caltrans also contributed by getting us detailed project information, so we wanted to thank their team. I can't thank Melissa Schick and Ned Kunadev enough at KNN for helping us out with the negotiations and the final approval. And then also, I'm sorry, Susan McKenzie, you're part of the SBCAG team. I know you're not here, but Susan also helped us with this. And then Norton Rose Fulbright was our legal counsel, and then US DOT and the Build America Bureau. So with that, that concludes our presentation, and we'd be happy to take any questions.
Questions from North County first?
Director Nelson.
Thank you, Chair Williams and Vice Chair Osborne. Turning back to slide or page 3 on the slide, the repayment schedule. It seems like in the first 3 years, it's just an interest-only loan. Is that what I understand?
Yes.
Okay. And that was the cash flow strategy. Is that?
Yes.
I just want to make sure I fully understood that. All right. And we're anticipating in 26 through 29 to have additional cash flows to be able to satisfy that, and so that's why we're deferring those.
Those, Melissa will be able to answer that question a little bit better. We're having to do some upfront payments for the loan that was required by BAB. So Melissa, if you could help answer that question, please.
Sure. Yeah, the US DOT has a statute requirement that a certain percentage of the loan must be repaid in the first 10 years of the borrowing. So it gets tricky for SBCAG because the borrowing is shorter, because the final maturity is structured in tandem with the final the term of the Measure A tax. So through negotiation, we strike some sort of kind of bargaining position such that we limited the percentage of principal that's repaid in the first 10 years of the borrowing. But the final agreement did require that we had certain we did have kind of an uneven debt service structure where a portion of the debt needed to be repaid sooner than later. But to answer the question with regard to the cash flow, this structure is built into the Measure A cash flow, and the debt service coverage, Measure A revenues to annual debt payments exceeds kind of 5 times, 5 times. So there's plenty of Measure A revenues as well as available revenues for projects, even with this structure.
Okay, thank you. And I guess the other question, so this is, we won't be necessarily taking $75 million out immediately. So this will roll down. This schedule here assumes that we took $75 million on day one.
Correct, Director Nelson through the chair. That is correct. This is the conservative scenario.
Right.
We are looking at doing an initial draw of 30 million based on cash flow needs. And at this point, we're comfortable with the 30 million. And then if we need to, we'll draw down more. So then it would be a pro rata difference of that for the 30 million versus the 75.
Thank you, Sarkis.
Any other questions from North County? Director Hart.
Yeah, Mr. Kochek had a really long list of people to thank, and the only person not on that list was Mr. Kochek. And so he deserves thanks for his persistence and determination on making this project happen. I remember distinctly when we were at a Self-Help Counties Coalition conference, and we're talking with folks who had done TIFIA loans, and both said to ourselves, hey, that's something we should look at. And here we are all this time later, I think 6 years later. It's actually happened. So thank you, Sarkis, for your focus, determination, and great work.
Thank you.
Director Sierra, may I? I just want to say congratulations. I mean, we've been working on this for a while. Our SBCAG staff is the best. I mean, I'm just really pleased that it worked out the way we hoped it would, and congratulations.
Thank you.
And then questions from those online. Director Perotti.
I'd like to echo what my colleagues I've heard from my other colleagues. Thank you so much. It really was a team effort, and a lot of work went into this. And yes, teamwork does make the dream work. And I really want to thank everybody for their work on this. Good work.
Any other folks that I didn't get to? Sarkis, I think you deserve a little victory lap here, and we are pleased that we have this option, and that obviously we need it for cash flow. We hope not to use it all, but it's a very good to have the option. There is no motion needed on this, so let's just go to public comment. Make sure there's.
Yes, Chair Williams, there's no request for public comment.
Great. Okay. Then we will go to item 7. Madam Clerk, will you please read item 7 into the record?
Certainly. Item 7, Central Coast Zero Emission Vehicle Strategy. Receive presentation on development of Central Coast Zero Emission Vehicle Strategy and provide input to staff.
Hello. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, directors. My name is Maya Kulkarni, and I'm on with Mike Usen from DKS. We're excited to share an update of our Central Coast Zero Emission Vehicle Strategy, which was funded by a Caltrans Sustainable Planning Grant. Now I'll pass it to Mike, who will be presenting. Oh no. I know, I guess I can do it.
Ms. Kulkarni, if you can present, that's fine, or
All right.
if you need to, we could go to item 8 and come back.
I can present it, but I don't. Do I?
You do. Come on. Everyone here is nice, my aunts.
Okay.
It's
Can you
your
hear me
call,
okay? I'm sorry.
Ms. Kulkarni, whether we could take it up or we could move to item 8 and come back to you.
I'll do it. Luckily, I've given this presentation before, so I can do it. Is the slide up? All right. Okay, this is just a quick overview, but I'm just going to skip it. So yes, we are working with SLOCOG and AMBAG for as well as other agencies between Ventura County and Santa Cruz County, and our consultants DKS as well as other sub-consultants have been putting together this strategy. So we've all probably heard of or experienced range anxiety. I know I have when looking to charge my car, but we're using this strategy to work with state and federal governments to expand the EV charging network and alleviate some of that range anxiety. So our objectives with the ZEV strategy are to take a look at the existing infrastructure and identify where there are gaps and barriers and where there's opportunities for recommended infrastructure improvements, policies, as well as implementation strategies. And the focus is going to be on unincorporated rural areas, disadvantaged communities, and interregional travel. And that's for drivers, transit, as well as goods movement. And the strategy will help position the Central Coast for state and federal funding opportunities. So with that, going into the funding, an example of a funding source is the NEVI program, which is part of the IIJA, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. The state is allocated formula funds and is prioritizing corridors, which Highway 101 is designated as an alternative fuel corridor. And then as well as other competitive applications. I do want to say that Highway 101 is not a high priority on the state list. So we'll be trying to get the federal program funding. And then also SB1 funding as well. Okay, so for public outreach, we've done some public outreach on this strategy. We held a kickoff stakeholder meeting that included local agencies, utility providers, as well as other organizations, just to get a sense of the existing plans and investments. And if there's any barriers, making sure to address any issues and concerns. And we're currently going through another round of stakeholder meetings. They started this Monday. We'll be having another one today with utility providers as well as tomorrow. Let's see. And so we also have a project website with more information, such as the stakeholder recordings, deliverables, and then as well as a link to the social pinpoint, which is an interactive map that allows users to pin locations where they would like to see chargers, and they can also add comments as well. This has been circulated throughout the study area, and members of the public have been adding their suggestions. We've gotten over, I think, 100 suggestions, so it's doing really well. Now for the project status for the completed tasks, we have created a webpage that I just talked about and held our first stakeholder meetings. We also just completed the existing conditions report and regional transit assessment. These are available on the project website as well. I think, yes. And the existing conditions report is looking at key corridors, travel patterns, and existing charging infrastructure, really focusing on the unincorporated areas. And then here, I think I have some. Okay. I think I have, oh yeah, so here's an example of some information that's in the report. There's some maps, and then, oh, I actually deleted the, I deleted the tables, but yeah, these are some maps of just the 1 mile buffer, which is for the NEVI program. It's specific to 1 mile along the Highway 101. And then for next steps, in terms of next steps, DKS will be completing an evaluation of opportunities report for features of infrastructure, which will be covering vehicle ranges, coverage, types of chargers needed depending on dwell times. We'll also, like I said, we're holding the stakeholder meetings, the focus group meetings this week. And then we'll also be holding a public workshop to gain public input. The date of that is TBD. And then lastly, the draft and final ZEV strategies, which are anticipated to be adopted in spring of 2023. So I know I kind of breezed through that presentation pretty quick, but if you do have any questions, let me know. And also, I think on the presentation, Mike Usen and Kendall Flint are our DKS points of contact.
So we do have several questions up here. If you're ready for those.
Yeah, let's start with North County questions.
All right. So Director Infante.
I'm curious, the funding that you're identifying for these stations is to build them or to maintain them or both? Can you help me, please?
I'm pretty sure it's to build them, right? Maintenance is usually whoever installs them. They're in charge of the maintenance and the operation.
But, okay, so there's been some current reports, if you read some of the news out there, of stations that are just out, they're not working. They're, the charging stations are excessive, well, I'm sorry. They're just not functioning, so you can't use them to charge your vehicle. So who's maintaining these? If you have the funding to build them, who's taking care of them and running them and potentially taking any revenue from them if you're charging?
I can, Director Infante, this initial round of funding, what the state is doing to get the money out is they're actually working with private partners, so like Electrify America. And so those companies are receiving the funding to install the infrastructure, and they're probably taking on a little bit on themselves to also maintain it. So that's where we're going with the first slug of money. After that, you provide a good comment about if there's going to be an opportunity for the funding to go to a local agency, how is the local agency then going to, use local resources to maintain it? So I think that's going to be something that we work with the state and federal government on as they roll out this money to make sure that they provide that money for maintenance of the infrastructure as well.
Thank you.
Let me add to that, just because I think Director Infante has an important point, is that I guess maybe to operationalize that question, it would be good to look at whether we can build into the contracts with those private individuals some sorts of penalties or requirement to remove if it's no longer functioning after a certain amount, or requirement to pay into another operator being able to install their equipment or something else. Other questions from the north?
Absolutely. So earlier we had a discussion about Highway 101 expansion and having good faith and support in that. I think there's an opportunity here, given we don't qualify and we're not high on the list for the 101 to qualify, but hearing the disadvantaged communities, the rural, you have Highway 1 and it runs through Guadalupe and it runs through Lompoc. And the city of Lompoc, I'm hopeful, is at your afternoon workshop for utilities, because we're our own utility. So we have our own electrical. So you can just nod
Yes,
your
the
head.
city.
And agree that they will be there. And if not, I'll make sure they're there, even though it's last minute, but you nodded your head, so they should be there. And we have had many discussions in our community about the isolation we experience and the lack of charging stations that would draw tourism, as well as provide for our commuters who might drive to the commuter bus in the morning and park at the city lot and return, but could take advantage of charging throughout the day, or individuals coming through on Highway 1 to stop and visit Lompoc or Guadalupe being able to charge. And we have chargers in town, but they're off the beaten path. They're not on Highway 1. They're not even in walking distance of Highway 1, where we have much of our dining, much of, and while some businesses have chosen to put it in. So I think there's an advantage here of, instead of focusing on Highway 101, taking advantage of these funds, you could pivot and provide some, of that patience and good faith by looking at Highway 1 and our rural and those communities that connect along those unincorporated areas like Orcutt, that connect through those, and maybe get some of that funding and use it in North County, and absolutely increase the value to our local residents, as well as those that commute back and forth. So just a thought.
And sorry, Chair Williams, just a quick response. We did highlight Highway 101, obviously, on here, but we've also included a number of east-west corridors along with State Route 1 within the study. So I just want to make sure that we have it. It's not just 101 focus.
Okay. That was all I heard. And I thought,
yes,
we don't want to miss this opportunity. If we can't get funding for the 101, there's plenty of other opportunities that absolutely qualify under that initial list of
yes.
outliers.
And we were, just to be frank with you all, we were disappointed with the prioritization. We actually directly asked for the criteria. We haven't gotten it yet.
Okay.
They're rolling out the money on certain corridors in the beginning, and then we're going to be probably in the 5th year of the 5-year, but we're assuming that this program will continue in future federal funding acts, and then that way we can better position ourselves. We are confined by a buffer that the federal government has identified with their program. It's a 1-mile buffer. Okay. So that's what we're working on in terms of this study, but we'll continue to work with local partners, private partners, and utilities to identify expanding that network. Okay. We did want to make the point, though, that we are looking at equity in this also, because if no one in California can buy a gas-powered vehicle by 2035, we want to make sure that our county and the 6 counties has the opportunity where somebody can charge at their apartment building or at a library nearby, where you're not going to be, stuck somewhere. So those are some anecdotes we wanted.
I mean, personally, I gave up my electric car because let's call it sphincter factor of coming over the grade back from Santa Barbara to just get home. The advantage was I had a charger provided that I had in my home, and I still have it. And I have neighbors who now have electric vehicles who can't afford to purchase their charger that might, choose to come over and use it. But again, there is a hotel, there is a winery, there is the hospital. Thank you, SBCAG, for the hospital having charging stations, and we worked with you on that. And there's the county public health station, and that's it. And so you don't have the lower income or the commuter populations moving forward on it if we aren't providing it as a public opportunity or a underwritten location that, maybe they have to pay for the energy consumed, but at least we're underwriting the infrastructure. So again, thank you for mentioning that you're paying attention. And if we, as the elected officials can communicate back to those that are making these decisions about what those parameters are, and we need to get in their ears, please give us those talking points and we'll happily do it. I mean, I'm happy to bug my representatives at the state and federal level about those issues. So-
Permission to replace range anxiety with the term you used for.
Yep.
future presentation. Okay.
Yep, absolutely. No,
Valid more.
because it is, it's literally coming down that grade and realizing I have 10 miles to get home and that digital says I have 7 miles. And I didn't have the hospital at that time that I could sweep into. It was literally everything that was close enough was still like, might as well try and get home. So yeah, not a good feeling at all. So I went back to my gas vehicle.
Just a comment. This is Julian. I just want to echo North County. In the city of Guadalupe, we have 2 chargers, both slow. And we're expected to move into electrical vehicles. There's no way. And I know our staff is working on with the construction that's going on with Caltrans along the Highway 1 corridor. But I just want to echo the need to make sure that we got in underrepresented communities. So thank you.
Other North
Thank
County
you,
questions or
yeah,
comments?
One more. Thank you, Chair Williams and Vice Chair Osborne. A couple things. Can you speak a little bit to, there's obviously different propriety, like the Tesla versus the other charging stations. So, not all charging stations work for all vehicles, right? Proprietary. Sorry, my speech impediment's kicking in here. So how do we kind of overcome some of that? Because as we're trying to build that infrastructure, I'm still trying to get my arms around that. Our office is working with both GM and Tesla to find locations in Orchid. We were actively doing that, but how do we? Where's that going as far as an opportunity for users?
So on our social pinpoint, we do have the difference between level 2 DC fast chargers. And I think it is up to, like Sarkis said in the beginning, it is up to the private companies themselves. We are seeing, I think, a lot of like Electrify Americas, which is good. And I think also Tesla did say that they have to provide their chargers for the general public as well. But yeah, with the strategy, I think we are trying to make sure it's not just all Tesla.
That's good. Thank you. And I guess my other question is, what is our work with our county planning and development? I know that I know our county's working on some of this for our own infrastructure, but it's been a priority. I'm sure Director Williams will probably jump in and inform us all. But are we working on giving sample code, building code, and things like that in place so that we can streamline these projects as part of the strategy?
So that's a great question, Director Nelson. We are actually working with the county on a couple locations within 101. And I think we're actually working, Chris Loodles, oh, he's not here. But we are working with them on identifying the right infrastructure, the permitting, and then the planning, and all in one. And so we worked with, I think, 3 different departments a couple weeks ago. So it's happening right now.
Yeah, just, it takes an EIR to get a gas station built. So, I mean, it's the same type of impact that we're looking at. And so, I know that there's a huge push for it, but at the same time, there's a lot of, that goes into this and trying to make sure that we're building that infrastructure, but also doing it in a thoughtful way.
Other questions, comments in the north? Online or in the south? I'll just try to help with a couple of those things, just because, range anxiety came up. It's important to remember these are our computer models, and those cars tell you how much miles they think they have based on your current and past driving. I've been now driving electric for 12 years and never run out. I can't say that for the time I drove gas cars. I definitely ran out of gas a couple times. And the reason is you just slow down a little bit and magically you have lots more range. But we need to definitely, anxiety as a feeling is definitely a real thing, and we need to do a lot to overcome it, which is the purpose of this project. I definitely think Director Julian's comments are well taken, that we need to prioritize some working class communities. It drives me crazy the amount of people that have to commute and spend a lot of money on gas and commuting, when electric cars could save them a lot of money, even with the sometimes a little bit more upfront cost. I think one of the ways we were overcoming it in 3CE territory, and most of you are in 3CE territory, is with larger incentives for working class communities. Income qualified folks can get up to $5,000 in the local incentive. That's addition to the state and national incentive. So you're talking about in totality approaching, some of it's direct, so about like half of it would be direct. It'd be like about 7,000 in direct rebate, and then up to $7,500 from the federal government in reduction off of their taxes, their taxable income. And maybe one of the other things is to try to promote that in some of the other utility areas, because I think that these incentives have worked in 3CE territory to this year, double the amount of cars that we are providing incentives for. So people are getting them out there. Also important is to pair that up with this project, because some of the areas, if we're not in priority, we don't get the incentives. 3C could help. They provide to anyone other ratepayers not only the charger, but some of the electrical work and labor, which I think is important to, and parts, which is important to get these chargers installed, is not just pay for the charger, because sometimes it takes some labor to install it and some other work on it. Most importantly for your purposes, Ms. Kulkarni, what's important is the difference in high-speed chargers. What people mark when they say a high-speed charger, they just mean a high-speed charger. But what most people are looking for is at least 50 kilowatt chargers right now. But another year from now or two, a lot of people are going to be looking for 100 kilowatt or 150 kilowatt chargers. So on a lot of the older models, the maximum that you're going to be able to get is about 50 kilowatt. There are models coming out right now with 250 and 350 kilowatt charging capability, which is commensurately faster. And so we need to make sure that some of the ones on the 101 have 100, 150, 250 kilowatt chargers. Now, Electrify America is a good contractor for some of those higher speed ones, because they tend to try to make them at those higher speed. But I think that's just something to pay attention to, is maybe 50 is the state of the art now, but in another year, people are going to be more wanting hundreds and 150s. Any public comment?
Chair Williams, we have no public comment.
Then we will, there's no presentation only, so no motion is required. We will go to item 8. Madam Clerk, will you please read item 8 into the record?
Thank you, Chair Williams. Item 8 is unmet transit needs process direction. 8A, direct SBCAG staff to carry out the 2023 unmet transit needs process with the expectation that no associated Transportation Development Act funding will be allocated pursuant to Article 8 of the Transportation Development Act. Or 8B, direct SBCAG staff to carry out the 2023 unmet transit needs process with the assumption that a portion of associated Transportation Development Act funding may be allocated pursuant to Article 8 of the Transportation Development Act.
Mr.
And I know that, yes. Thank you, Chair Williams. Good morning, Chair Williams and directors. Mike Becker, I know the staff report said Jared Carvalho. So back in 2019, the board indicated that it was not going to allow Transportation Development Act funds to go for non-transit purposes. And recognizing that this, knowing that in advance changed how we approach this. And it significantly reduces our workload in terms of going through this process that we're required to go through each year. And I believe, if I recall correctly, the board was not interested in a formal written policy that the board approves that just goes into on forever. Rather, we would ask the question each year. So every year since then, we've been coming back, and this is the third year to ask the question. And the question is, shall we conduct the process? Actually, I can go to the next slide, and it puts it on there. Shall we conduct the process that would enable the use of TDA funds for streets and roads purposes, or purposes outside of funding transit? Or is the board saying, no, we're not going to allow that we should undertake it where no funding no TDA LTF funding is going to go outside of transit? So option A doesn't allow, it takes it off the table right now. It says we will not be using this funding for anything other than transit. And option B, it doesn't say that we are going to use the funds for other than transit purposes, but it enables it. So today, I did want to give a little more detail on kind of the bigger picture of what the Transportation Development Act is and how it funds transit. So it is a law that was passed when Ronald Reagan was governor. I don't think he's signing the TDA there, but looking for looking for an old picture of Ronald Reagan as governor signing a bill, and that's what we came up with. But it is a state funding source for transit, and I'd like to say that probably most states in the United States do not have a state fund for transit. It's funded locally and with federal. California is unique. California provides a state source for funding. When the bill was passed, it was a compromise between the urban interests and the rural interests. And the compromise was, we said, if we are meeting our transit demand and there's no additional demand that we're not meeting, then we can use whatever's left over to fix our roads or for purposes other than transit. And so that's what brings the planning side of SBCAG into the process. Is we go through this unmet transit needs every year, where we seek to determine if there are unmet transit needs, if they're reasonable to meet. And if we go through the full process and we find that there's unmet transit needs that are reasonable to meet, a claimant could not ask for money to say repave roads until that need was met. So within the TDA, or Transportation Development Act, there's two pots of funding. And there's the first is the state transit assistance, which comes from part of the tax on diesel fuel. And it goes by a formula that's half population and half fare box recovery for the transit providers. And we're not talking about that today. That goes to transit, period. The other part is what we are talking about today, is the local transportation fund. A quarter cent of all sales tax goes into this local transportation fund, and then is allocated to jurisdictions by population. Written into the law, 2% of it must be spent on infrastructure for bicycle pedestrians, which could be fixing sidewalks or restriping bike lanes, and 3% goes to SBCAG to administer the program, including paying us for going through the transit needs process. LTF is what we're talking about today. So here's, this is North County transit funding. It's a little bit dated. It's from fiscal year 14-15, because we did the work back when we developed the North County Transit Plan, which was approved in 2015. I don't know why it didn't stay aligned there, but this just provides a picture of kind of how these different funding sources fit in. So roughly 30% or 29% is federal programs that go to the jurisdictions for transit purposes. A bit better than half is state. And that's the two programs within the Transportation Development Act. And the vast majority of that is the LTF, the Local Transportation Fund, what's the subject of today. And then finally, there's local funding, which comes from passenger fares, it comes from Measure A subsidies, it comes from other income streams that that the transit agencies have. And I will say, the South County is a bit different because we have one provider that serves the South County. And because it's organized as a transit district, the funding just goes straight to them. So it's not a question of using it for anything other than transit purposes. So in last June, the board approved the LTF allocations for the North County operators. And here's what they look like. This was a board item 4E from your meeting in June. And you could see how much of this LTF that is going to each of the North County transit providers. And this is, it's a little bit, the county gets an asterisk there, and it's because the county doesn't operate transit itself. It contracts with others to offer it. So for instance, the Orchid area is served by Santa Maria, so the county provides some of its funding to Santa Maria. Unincorporated Lompoc Valley, the same thing. And so the vast majority of the county's funding is allocated to other agencies, and then the county just has a bit over $500,000 left over out of a total of about $3 million. So in the, it's not very clear there. It goes back, I think we're on the far left is early 2000s, and then marching towards the right is current times. And this is the portion of the LTF funding that was going to other than transit purposes. And in those early years, it was, you know, in the neighborhood of 50% of all of this LTF funding was going to streets and roads. In 2006, there was a lawsuit, a settlement, and the last time we had an unmet transit need that was reasonable to meet, and it was it created the original Breeze route, which is currently operated by the city of Santa Maria, and it goes back and forth between Santa Maria and Lompoc. It still exists today. And then in 2014, 2015 is the other big drop off. And that was when Lompoc started banking funds and then building the transit facility, which is an eligible transit use. So that's not in question. And then going on, it just remained, the county was putting a little bit of money into streets and roads. And then you get to those last 2 years where we got the direction from the board that we're not going to allow transit funding to go to streets and roads. So that was what zeroed us out over the last 2 fiscal years or 3 fiscal years. So when we go through this process, we do a fairly robust public outreach process. In years past, we used to do a hearing in front of the board and would have people line up and express what their concerns with transit were. We took it away from the board, and now we do public hearings outside of the board. We do online survey. We do, people could send us emails. And on top of that, anytime we receive, somebody sends an email to info@SBCAG or Clean Air Express, gets something saying, hey, you should offer this service. Even if it's outside this window, we stick it in a file, and then it becomes part of the comments for this. So we collect a lot of comments related to transit through this process. And over the last couple of years, we've had Lauren Bianchi Clement has been our PIO, has done an excellent job of helping us get the word out even further. And we've gotten a lot more of input. So that happens every year, no matter if you choose A or B, that's going to happen. So we're going to determine what the public's comments on transit, what are the unmet needs are. And then it gets different how we go forward, but I just want to say we first have to make an assessment of, is this comment, does it identify what is considered an unmet transit need? And the board adopted that definition back in 2006. And, basically if somebody needs to get from one place to another and there's no transit service, or there's not a transit option for that, it's an unmet transit need. If it says that you should move the stop a block down the road, that's not an unmet transit need. That's what's considered an operational issue related to this. And then after that, we have to assess whether it's reasonable to meet. And that's essentially, will it satisfy the fare box recovery requirements? Will it operate in line with how the other services operate? And as I mentioned on that prior slide, we have not had an unmet transit need that was reasonable to meet since 2006, when the Breeze was created. And so here's where it gets a bit different. So if with option A, if we take it off the table now, that says that we're not going to consider allowing funds to go to streets and roads, we do the public outreach process. That's the same regardless of which option we go. And then we document the comments into a memorandum. We share that with the transit providers, and we ask you to receive it, and that's it. So we do learn what the issues are. If we go with option B, we assess each comment, determine as an unmet transit need. If it does identify an unmet transit need, we run it through the formula to determine if it's reasonable to meet based off of the definition from the board. We ask the board to make a finding via a vote and a resolution. We also conduct a demographic analysis that determine if there's changes in the population of the region that might highlight that there's an unmet transit need that wasn't uncovered during the process. But as we go through it, it's, SBCAG staff, we're absolutely neutral. We're going to do whatever one we're asked to do. Just it helps us budget our time if we know in advance. That's why we ask the question. And also with the option B, it is very difficult to find something that would be reasonable to meet. And I think there are there were examples where there was transit needs identified through this process. They were found not reasonable to meet by following the definition. However, they were implemented outside of the process. So these comments are not, they don't fall into deaf ears. They are considered, and I think it's SBCAG's goal, it's the goal of all the transit operators to provide the best service that we can. So that's the primary difference between the two. And back to the recommended action. So again, A says we're taking it off the table. We're going to do the abbreviated process. B says we're going to leave it as an option to potentially allow non-transit uses of the LTF funds. And to make your job easier, we got conflicting yet unanimous recommendations from the Technical Transportation Advisory Committee, which is the Public Works folks, and SBCTAC, which is our Social Services Transit Advisory Committee, which is the transit operators, plus some members of the public who have volunteered to be on that committee. I'm happy to take any questions.
I'll also just add that it was County Public Works that brought this up to the TTAC, but you should know that County Public Works no longer wishes to use transit funds for non-transit uses, according to the director who I spoke with yesterday. So they got this all started, but they are withdrawing that request.
And Chair Williams, if I know we have a request for public comment from Chris Snedden.
Oh, great, he's here. So we'll get that at public comment. First questions coming from the north.
I got a question. It's Lavanino. So if I remember right, historically, the county was the only one that was using these funds for streets and roads.
Director Lavanino, over the since 2014, 2015, when Lompoc started banking and building the transit center, then it became only the county. But if you go historically, it was Lompoc and the county, and you go back further and there was more. But the last
10 years.
Yeah, last 10 years, Lompoc stopped, and it just was a small amount from the county.
Thank you.
Other questions from the north?
Councilmember, Director Nelson.
Thank you, Vice Chair Osborne. So instead of streets and roads, if those funds, excess funds above the unmet or the the necessary needs of transit, could those be spent on bike and ped improvements? And would that, because there's a huge backlog of bike and ped improvements that are needed in the county, instead of going straight to the street and roads. For that, which option would that fit under?
Good question, Director Nelson. And that's something that we actually talked about a bit in the past, was if we're not going to spend it on transit, would still have to go option B and run the full process. And then that would be up to the applicant or the county to put in a claim and say, we're going to do this with the funds. And I know that there was an issue, even if you build a sidewalk to connect to the bus station, you'd still have to go option B, even though it's essentially a transit project. You're making a connection to the transit. But if it's clearly transit, then option A, things such as, bike lanes or sidewalks to connect to transit, that's, even though there's a direct nexus, it would still be option B.
And how is the funds, if there are excess funds above unmet needs, how are those being invested now?
That's a question for the County Public Works.
Great. I look forward to hearing it.
This is Director Osborne, Vice Chair Osborne. And you shouldn't expect Lompoc to have a concern until we're finished building that transit facility. So we won't be interested in revisiting it until for an unmet needs study. And I think at that point, you might see it be, it's 10 years from the last time you did it. So just to let you know and reassure you that even though my public works director is part of this and it was a unanimous vote, I checked with him, and until we actually finish building out that facility, that's where that money needs to go. So.
Other questions from the north? Questions from the south? Director Hart.
Not a question, just a comment. It seems like we are this is a problem in search of or solution in search of a problem. I mean, we've been doing this now for 4 years in a row. It sounds like everybody's in agreement, that we just continue what we've been doing. It'd be nice to have Mr. Sneddon confirm, that the county's not going to be using this funding for streets and roads, and then let's just move on to option A and get the next item on the agenda done.
Maybe we'll go to Mr. Sneddon unless there's questions or comments online. Mr. Sneddon. Public comment, beginning with Mr. Sneddon.
Good morning, everybody. Chris Sneddon, County Public Works. As was stated, I think Public Works is comfortable with option A for this fiscal year. So I don't really have anything to add beyond that. Thank you.
I've got a question. So where do the funds go then? If we're meeting our, if there's no unmet needs and we have excess funds, where are those dollars going?
So currently any excess funds are going into reserves.
Okay. So for future unmet needs?
For future costs, yes.
And
that are eligible for that use.
Is there a fund balance on that right now?
Yes, there's fund balance in there.
Could you tell us how much that is?
I can't tell you off the top of my head. I think it's about $1 million.
Okay, thank you.
Other now comments, Director Hart.
I'll move option A.
I will second. Other comments?
Yes. Supervisor Nelson. And so we're really, or sorry, Director Nelson, we're really talking about the funds that are supposed to be allocated to Jonah and I's districts here. And I mean, because everybody else is prescribing their funds for other uses. And this is really for North County unincorporated areas that we both represent. Absolutely, let's make sure we hit our unmet needs. But if there's $1 million sitting out there that could be used for things like bike and pedestrian use, that's substantial. We have lots of unmet needs that could be served, and I think that could be within the spirit of this. And so it's not just $50,000 or $100,000 that we're looking at. I mean, that's potentially $1 million that the county has sitting there that we have to make a different kind of finding to be able to access those. And so while I sympathize that SBCAG doesn't want to do the additional labor if it's not necessary. I mean, it is a large amount of money. They get 3% of the LTF funds to do that analysis. So I would actually, and at the end of the day, that's still a policy decision for the county to make. And so I'm actually supportive of option B, so I won't be voting for option A.
And Chair, if this is Director Hartman, if I may, as I think about, vehicle miles traveled and the focus on housing that we've got ahead of us and increased housing along transit corridors, I'm comfortable with leaving this money in a fund, in a reserve. It's not being spent elsewhere. There's no one who is more supportive of bike paths and sidewalks and things than I am. And it could be used for that in the future as well. I mean, what I'm happy to know is that we have that fund accumulating over time. But I have a feeling that our transit needs are going to be greater over time, given these other pressures for vehicle miles traveled analysis, as well as the focus on our housing element and doing that along transit corridors. So I will be supporting option A.
Other comments from the north? I'll just say that for me, it's about looking at this holistically. There may be, I think there probably are some needs in the county. I would love to provide better transit, but there's also some things that are clearly outside of the county's scope, but still in the county's interest, such as the Clean Air Express. This is a service that has a high fare box return that we actually charge a decent amount for. And we've discussed before the possibility of adding another route per day or other uses. So to me, it just seems like when there's no agencies asking to use this for streets and roads, that we should go with option A, especially because it forces us to look hard at, is there some other need out there that we're not currently addressing? And I very much believe that County Public Works is looking at a number of those, needs some time. So I'm supportive of option A today, so we can make sure that we don't have any transit needs before attempting to use it for streets and roads. It's also a cheaper, easier process for SBCAG staff. So there's a motion and a second.
Director Williams, Chair Williams, I'd like to
Sure.
comment on that. I just want to reiterate that SBCAG is getting funding to do this analysis already. 80% of the taxpayers who this money is supposed to be allocated towards are in my district, and they have a lot of other needs besides solving the problems for the rest of the county. I understand that that's a county need. I'm not against a county-wide investment in Clean Air Express, but these are funds that are directed to a certain portion of our county that I represent. And I would like to see them go towards direct services to those residents. And that includes even transit, if that's what it looks like in the future. So that's what I just want to make sure that when we're thinking about this, City of Santa Maria is getting these funds, City of Santa Barbara, MPD is getting these funds, and that can all get reinvested into the Clean Air Express as a region. But again, these are coming to a specific region that I represent, and I like to see them at least be considered to be, directly touch those residents who are paying those taxes and are expecting to receive those in return.
Director Williams, Slavanino, Chair.
Yes.
And I understand Director Nelson's argument, and it makes a lot of sense. But if there was a project that you had that and maybe, so this year I'm going to support option A just because I think putting them in a reserve is just, if we're not going to use it, is a smart idea. They're not going anywhere. And maybe in the future, if there was something presented that said, hey, we've got this bike path or we've got this access to transit that we would like to do in Orchid, I think everybody here would be extremely supportive. So a no today or an option A today is not a no on a project in the future in Orchid. So
I just want to remind everybody, it's not just Orchid, it's Los Alamos, Denver Village, Mission Hills, Casmelia, Sisquoc, Gary, and Tepisque. Los Olivos and a lot of and other unincorporated communities in the North County. Los Olivos.
What area don't you represent? Jeez.
I don't represent San Ynez or Los Olivos, but I have the rest of them in the North County.
Director
Or
Lavity,
Fiona.
I'm so glad we have your levity in these cases. Any other comment?
Yes, Chair Williams. It was not clear to me from Mr. Becker's comments what the process is what required to access the reserve funds. It is clear what we need to do about this year's allocation, go through the unmet needs process, but is there a separate process that's required to access the reserve funds, and could that be initiated, during this fiscal year to address Supervisor Nelson's concerns and Supervisor Lavanino's point?
Director Hart, very good question. And I don't want to tell you the wrong answer, so I'll get back to you on that.
I think that answers the question. We don't really know what we need to do about the reserves today, but why go through the process? We can deal with that in the future. So I urge a vote for option A.
Roll call, please.
I'm sorry, I didn't get who made the second.
Oh, it was Director Hart made the first, and I made the second.
Oh, you did. Okay, thank you. Okay, now we go. Director Hart,
Aye.
Hartman,
Aye.
Nelson,
Reluctantly, aye.
Lavanino,
Aye.
Infante,
Aye.
Julian,
Aye.
Sierra,
Aye.
Osborne,
Aye.
Patino,
Aye.
Perotti,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Rouse,
Aye.
and Chair Williams.
Aye.
Motion passes 13-0.
We are on to item 9, 1-minute reports. Do any members in North County have a 1-minute report? Seeing none. Director Hart, do you have a 1-minute report?
No, I do not.
Okay.
Chair Williams, I just wanted to mention that the Refugio Road construction, trail construction project near Santa Ynez High School, where tragically a young student was killed in 2015. We have a demonstration project now of how this trail is going to work. I'm sorry that Mr. Snedden left because he's done a lot of the negotiation along the right of way. But we had a lot of community people, and the Bucket Brigade led the project, and Bucket Brigadiers from South County came up and helped us and showed us how to do it. And a lot of people volunteered. So it was a really exciting project. And I encourage you, if you're on near 246 and Refugio, to check it out.
Well, just in case there's some folks out there who don't know about it, Director Rouse and myself attended a meeting about the construction beginning on the Olive Mill roundabout. That's beginning in November, and will must mean that the on and off ramp, the northbound off ramp and the southbound on ramp, will be closed. And so, folks, it's a good idea. Don't go use Coast Village as a commuter route, because it really doesn't go anywhere beginning in November. There are alternate routes for commuters. Local traffic will continue through the construction. The intersection will not be closed, but the on and ramp will be. And it's great working with the city and Caltrans on this exciting project. It's probably the one of the intersections that does not work or works most poorly in the entire South County. And so it would be hard to make the intersection worse, but I think this roundabout will make it much better. And thanks to Caltrans for funding it early so that we could do it before the freeway project. Director Perotti has a 1-minute report. Director
Thank you,
Perotti?
Chair. I'll be quick. Last Tuesday's meeting, council meeting, we had a presentation by on the Santa Barbara County broadband the draft strategic plan. And it was very well received and great presentation. A lot of really good questions were asked by our council. So I just want to thank everybody involved in that. End of report.
Thank you. Executive Director's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson, members of the board. I have some really good news. We received the California Transportation Commission released their staff recommendations for the active transportation program, and we received the recommendation is to fund 7 out of the 9 projects that were submitted, $80 million for our county out of this program cycle. So I really want to congratulate all the local jurisdictions who applied. If you want me to go through the list of projects, not in priority order, but I think it's just by jurisdiction. The County of Santa Barbara received their Isla Vista Bike and Pedestrian Program project. This was one of 3, and the other 2 were not funded. So, and the City of Santa Barbara had their Cliff Drive project funded, their West Side and Lower West Neighborhood project funded, as well as their Milpas Street crosswalk safety sidewalk widening project. The City of Santa Maria had their active transportation, safe routes to school corridor improvement project funded, and Caltrans had their Los Alamos Connected Community project. And City of Lompoc also had their project funded. And I think the City of Lompoc was the highest scoring project from our county. And you were, I think, you scored the 7th highest from the state, and both Santa Barbara and Santa Maria scored very well as well. We're really happy for our local partners. We put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears locally to make sure our projects were competitive, and all the jurisdictions had the tools they needed to apply. And I think the showing of having 7 out of the 9 funded shows the benefit of that. And also the City of Santa Barbara for sharing their secrets. They've been very successful throughout this program, and obviously they were successful in this process as well, but then sharing their secrets of how they go about submitting projects, which ones they choose, and how they score them, and making sure they only submit projects they know will score well. The 2 that did not get funded was the County of Santa Barbara Old Town Orchid Streetscape and Safety Enhancement Project, and the County of Santa Barbara Cathedral Oaks Road Complete Streets Project. That was from Patterson to 154, which I thought was that would be a huge improvement to that area. So unfortunately, those 2 did not get funded. They were scored 70 and 64 points out of 100. So those were at the bottom. But all the projects, what I've seen quickly looking at it, we just got it on our drive up here, that I think you had to score 89 or above to get funding on the statewide process. In the local, the rural portion, there was a little more leeway there, but on a statewide basis, you really have to put good quality projects forward. And that's what we do in Santa Barbara, is we put good quality projects forward, and it shows. So congratulations to everyone on that. And there's a question from Director Nelson.
Yes, can you remind me how much that Los Alamos project?
Los Alamos, it is 8.1 was what funded. The total project cost is 8.525. So
And-
$8 million. Is
And I
what
actually
the-
knew that answer, but I
Okay.
was,
Yeah.
I just wanted to celebrate that.
Yeah.
That's a huge win for the Los Alamos community and Caltrans.
For putting it forward.
Yeah, no, I actually wanted to thank a few people here. I
Mhm.
wanted to thank, first of all, Supervisor Hartman, who represented that area before my representation. And I believe this is the 3rd try for that
Mhm.
grant. So, 3rd time's the charm. $8 million into a community this size of Los Alamos is significant, as well as all the other things that Caltrans is currently working on in Los Alamos. So thank you all. I wanted to thank Chris Sneddon and Scott McAlpin for working with us, as well as Madeline Jacobson from Caltrans, who really ran point on this and got everybody together, did a lot of outreach, and it's a huge win for that community. And I want to thank you.
And if I may add, the community itself, it did a lot of outreach, and I think that was contributed grant points too. So they really wanted this.
So, and I also want to thank Jackie Mata for her participation and advocacy in the guidelines workshop to make sure that our region's input was incorporated into the process and made our projects were competitive with the call for projects. So we will get you the details when we get back to the office, because we're just trying to decipher what we got. But I think I'm just really proud of our region. You know, when these opportunities step up, you all step up, you make it happen as well. So, and I think it also shows into my next point is our CTC reception that we had last week. Amazing. Thank you. Thank you all for showing up and rubbing elbows with our decision makers and making relationships. And Director Williams saved me as well at the CTC meeting because he answered a very, very difficult question that I would have been going blah, 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 on. And he did a bang up job and hit it out of the park. So I really appreciate my board. I really appreciate working here and working with you and getting these successful projects moving forward. And it just helps to have your support in every step of the way. And also the barking dog. Yeah. So moving on, we do have a call for projects out for REAP 2.0. We are seeking applications for the $5.3 million that is available. The deadline to submit applications is November 11th, Veterans Day. That's a day off. Okay. So I guess you get an extra day if they want to work, during Veterans Day, but at 5 p.m. on Veterans Day. And this is to seek transformative housing and sustainable community transportation projects. Those eligible to apply include housing authorities, school districts, special districts, community-based organizations, tribal entities, cities, and the county, Santa Barbara. And the application is available on our REAP 2.0 website. And if you need any information, please call Dejong. She's our intern that's doing a bang up job there too. And the information will be in our Friday updates if you need that details. Okay, skipping around. SBCAG will be at the Santa Maria Chamber Economic Development Commission meeting on October 28th. We're giving a presentation on North County regional projects that we're involved in, and it includes the 166 Black Road intersection project. So they'll be giving an update on that. And I do want to apologize for DKS not being available for your meeting today. I can request them to be on the ZEV emission vehicle strategy that Maya hit it out of the park and pitching in and giving the presentation. But if you would like to have DKS available, I could ask them to come to your sub-regional meeting so they can answer the questions directly, because I think you all had a lot of input that is valuable to the process moving forward. So I will ask, I'm getting nods in the right heads going in the right direction. So I will ask them to participate in your sub-regionals coming up this month. And with that, I'll be quiet and you can ask any questions if you have any. Thank you.
Questions from North County? Questions from South or online? And we will move to the Caltrans report.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. I'm Scott Eads here for Tim Govens today, and I do have a few updates for you. One, I wanted to highlight that the Santa Ynez 246 beautification project, this was a Clean California project, broke ground. We had a little groundbreaking event on October 6th. Exciting project that is doing a lot of different improvements there, including artistic fencing, native plant landscaping, upgraded irrigation using recycling water, a decorative crosswalk, and better directional signage. So exciting to see that moving forward. That's the first Clean California project that's actually beginning construction in District 5. And I also wanted to highlight that the 101 Butterfly Lane pedestrian undercrossing project is now complete, largely complete in terms of the major infrastructure improvements. It now includes a ADA accessible ramps on both sides of that undercrossing, as well as some improvements at the railroad crossing for pedestrians. And landscaping is still forthcoming, so look out for that, but it is open and available for use. A great project. And then there's a couple of grant cycles that are coming up that I just wanted to highlight. They're really preparations are underway, and they're seeking input on guidelines. So this is an opportunity to provide input on the Clean California Local Grant Program Cycle 2. So there's a new influx of dollars on that as part of the governor's budget. $100 million more in Clean California local grant funds are available in the 23-24 state budget, or to be enacted in the state budget. And so they are doing a workshop on Thursday, November 3rd from 1 to 2:30 p.m. and we'll be seeking input on the grants.
the guidelines and the, let's see here, that we're expecting the grant application deadline in April 2023. So it's a ways out, but just wanted to give any opportunities that anybody has interest in pitching in now for information on the guidelines themselves. And then the second is that Caltrans is also preparing for the 22-23 Sustainable Transportation Planning Grant Program. And that's the program that funded the ZEV study that we talked about earlier. And there's additional dollars this upcoming cycle. There's comments, there's a guide out that just was released. Comments are due on November 4th or before. And there's a couple workshops that are being held, one on November 9th and another on November 10th. And just to give you a sense of what we're looking at in terms of funds, the Sustainable Community Grant Program is around $30 million available. There's a new Climate Adaptation Planning Grant Program with $50 million available, and strategic partnership grants at $4.5 million available. So sizable amount of dollars. Again, we're at just the workshops and guidelines stage at this point in time, and looking forward to any input we receive to refine those. And then I just wanted to highlight again, Los Alamos is the first Caltrans-led application that's been funded statewide throughout Caltrans. And it was a lot of work, and really appreciate the input from both Supervisor Hartman in previous cycles and all the work that she and her staff put into it. And now Supervisor Nelson really stepped in and provided just direct support with some of the public engagement, and to both of you for securing a local match that really helped the project move forward as well. So really exciting project. It's doing a ton in terms of class 2 bike lanes, sidewalk gap closures, some educational and some direct involvement with the school. And so it's a really exciting project, and appreciate everybody's support on that, as well as county staff. That's all I have. Happy to take any questions.
Questions in the north?
No question, just comment.
Go for it.
Slavinino, I just wanted to say I appreciate the cleanup that's going on along 101. There's a lot of not exactly interacting with the homeless encampments, but discouraging them from cleaning up all the debris that's alongside the 101 and kind of trimming all those bushes, and it just leaves fewer places for people to camp. There is one though, and I think that whoever it is kind of looks like they found a perfect place, because on the right side of the freeway going like towards Donovan, and it's been there for months now. But I think if I'm not mistaken, if your jurisdiction ends where the fence is, because these people have figured out a way to, they're just on the other side of the fence, but behind the business, there's a warehouse there, and there's a space of about 3 feet. Seems very, very dangerous. If somebody goes off the road there, somebody's going to get really hurt. But I didn't know if that's where your jurisdiction ends at the chain link fences, or because I'm not sure who at this point to contact. I mean, we've talked about all of our outreach teams, but I'm even scared to send our outreach team out there because of the way it's laid out. So
If I could respond through the chair, typically it would be that right-of-way fence is the edge of our property, but that's not always the case. Sometimes there's little pockets, so we can look into that one. So.
Questions, comments from the south? I just want to, again, thank you for the grant for the zero emission strategy, and for prioritization of doing this roundabout work ahead of the freeway construction. Thank you. Go to item 12, committee meeting reports. Director Hart.
Yeah, the last Lausanne board meeting had 2 really significant items. One was the emergency track stabilization work that's happening between San Clemente and Dana Point. The tracks there are almost literally on the sandy beach. There's some rock revetment that was placed during a previous big slide, and unfortunately that whole area is slipping again. So there's emergency work going on, about $12 million that the Orange County Transportation Authority has invested to fix that temporarily. The hope is that the work can be completed and the trains can be resumed in mid-December, but it's going to be an ongoing challenging problem. In the PowerPoint presentation that was shared with the Lausanne board, there's an amazing photograph of the Pacific Surfliner going along that part of the coastline and the waves from the ocean crashing over the tracks right in front of the train. So it's in a constantly dangerous situation, and it kind of highlights the problem that we're going to have along the whole corridor with climate change and sea level rise. And the next big item was a long discussion and presentation about the Del Mar Bluffs area, which is having a similar problem with erosion. And the long-term solution there is to move the tracks inland and tunnel them through that part of the San Diego County coast. And the price tag to do that is north of $3 billion for about 5 miles of track. And so it kind of gives you a sense of the scope of the challenge and the critical nature of having a railroad that is incredibly beautiful and scenic, and one of the big reasons why folks love traveling along the corridor, but it all presents some real serious challenges to maintaining the infrastructure going forward. That's my report.
Director Julian, Calvans,
Yeah,
report me?
yes, there's one item that I mentioned before regarding the ticketing of 15 passenger Calvans drivers, and it's all come to resolution where the driver doesn't count. So there's 14 passengers and all you need is the regular license to drive the vans. So, and then Santa Barbara County has 153 Calvans units, so they're not going to get ticketed anymore. So that's it.
Any questions for either of our directors? Seeing none, I will move to adjournment. Next board meeting is on Thursday, November 17th at 10 a.m. Thank you.